George and Evelyn Lawrence were an average retired couple when they first stepped onto the Sea Voyager. What was supposed to be a joyful 2-week vacation after years of dedication turned out to be something more. Life on the ship felt unique in a way they hadn't expected. Without the usual worries of life on land, they discovered the ideal retreat. Unbeknownst to anyone, they began plotting a way to stay longer than their initial itinerary. Initially, they thought about extending their trip for a few more days, but a simple extension turned into something more. They began making subtle arrangements, ensuring their presence went unnoticed. While most passengers disembarked at the end of their cruise, George and Evelyn remained. They carefully avoided drawing attention, switching cabins and blending in with new groups of passengers. Soon, weeks turned into months, and they began crafting a long-term plan. George and Evelyn's secret life aboard the ship required careful planning. They developed routines that mimicked the habits of other passengers to avoid suspicion. They ate at different restaurants, attended shows sporadically, and even made friends with other travelers, only to say goodbye as if they were leaving too. They kept their heads down, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the crew. Each day was filled with cautious choices to make sure they remained unnoticed. Over time, they became experts at staying inconspicuous. Evelyn would chat with tourists about their next destination, while George would casually ask about their adventures. They played the part so convincingly that no one ever suspected they had been on the ship far longer than anyone else. They would disembark at ports and reboard like other passengers, mingling with new groups each time. Every day felt like a new vacation, yet they never left. While on board, George and Evelyn became friendly with other passengers, but they never allowed anyone to get too close. They'd share drinks, exchange stories, and even laugh with new friends, but their mysterious longevity was never revealed. They became experts at listening rather than talking about themselves. Whenever someone inquired about their time on board, they would simply smile and shrug. They gave vague responses, mentioning long vacations or lifelong retirement plans. Aware that staying in one place would draw attention, George and Evelyn took precautions. They frequently changed cabins, relocating their belongings every few weeks. They'd sometimes request upgrades, other times downgrade to more modest rooms. The key to their survival was remaining anonymous, ensuring no one questioned their extended presence. To the crew, they seemed like regular passengers enjoying a leisurely trip, constantly moving between staterooms, making them difficult to track. Over time, George and Evelyn honed the art of invisibility. They attended fewer ship-sponsored activities, opting instead for quieter corners of the vessel where they could go unnoticed. They spent hours on deck reading or sipping tea in less popular cafes. At night, they would walk the quiet hallways, admiring the ocean under the stars. They became ghosts on the Sea Voyager, rarely interacting with the crew and always staying out of sight. Despite their careful planning, George and Evelyn couldn't avoid every encounter with the staff. The occasional familiar face in the dining room or at the bar led them to grow more cautious. They changed their eating habits and frequented different lounges, always conscious of the eyes around them. The couple's daily life turned into a careful balancing act, demanding constant vigilance. They understood their secret couldn't remain hidden forever, yet they were determined to prolong it. In the end, it wasn't the passengers or the ship's officers who exposed them, but an unexpected source, the laundry service. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. One day, a young laundry cleaner noticed something odd while collecting clothes from George and Evelyn's cabin. The couple had been using the service regularly, but the cleaner realized they had been aboard for much longer than a typical cruise would allow. Their laundry patterns didn't match up with the usual 2-week turnover of passengers. The cleaner didn't immediately suspect anything nefarious, but something seemed off. She mentioned her observation to a colleague in passing, noting how the couple's laundry kept appearing even as new passengers cycled through. Word spread quietly among the lower ranks of the ship's staff. Conversations over dinner breaks began to focus on George and Evelyn, with workers wondering if the couple were stowaways or part of some strange unsolved mystery. As whispers among the crew grew louder, more staff members began keeping an eye on George and Evelyn. The waiters noticed they had been dining for months without ever leaving, and the entertainment staff recognized their faces from shows spanning many voyages. Curiosity turned to suspicion, and soon the couple was under quiet surveillance. Still, George and Evelyn remained oblivious, continuing their routine as they always had, unaware that their secret was unraveling. It didn't take long for the crew to connect the dots. One officer began reviewing passenger records and noticed the couple had never officially disembarked. Their names weren't on any recent passenger manifests, yet they still occupied a cabin. The officer discreetly informed his superiors about the situation. What began as a simple remark from a laundry worker had escalated into a full-scale investigation into how the couple had remained unnoticed. One evening, George and Evelyn were summoned to the ship's office. They had been expecting this moment for some time, but when it finally came, it still caught them off guard. The captain and a few officers sat them down, explaining that the crew had noticed their prolonged presence. The couple was calm, knowing that their decade-long journey might be coming to an end. They had prepared for this, but it still stung to face the truth. When asked how long they had been aboard, George and Evelyn shared their story. They hadn't planned to stay forever, but 1 year had turned into 2 and 2 into 10. Life on the ship had become their reality, a never-ending vacation where they didn't have to worry about bills, medical appointments, or family obligations. The captain listened with a mix of disbelief and amusement as they explained how they had survived unnoticed for so long. The captain found himself in a difficult position. On one hand, George and Evelyn hadn't violated any laws by remaining on board, though they had taken advantage of a loophole in the ship's system. On the other hand, their ongoing presence created a logistical dilemma. How had they managed to go unnoticed for so long? The captain realized that this wasn't just a matter of evicting 2 passengers. It was about preventing something like this from happening again. After much deliberation, the captain decided to handle the situation quietly. Rather than causing a public scandal or alerting the authorities, he offered George and Evelyn a deal. They could stay until the end of the current voyage, but after that, they would need to disembark and leave the Sea Voyager. George and Evelyn agreed, though the reality of their departure weighed heavily on them. Their decade-long adventure was finally coming to a close. For the remaining weeks of their final voyage, George and Evelyn soaked in every moment. They revisited their favorite spots on the ship, from the quiet reading corner in the library to the secluded deck where they had spent countless evenings watching the sunset. Every meal and every stroll along the promenade felt like a farewell to the life they had cherished for the past decade. It was a bittersweet moment, but they understood it couldn't go on indefinitely. As their final days on the Sea Voyager drew near, George and Evelyn discreetly said their goodbyes to the crew. No longer invisible, they had become part of the ship's lore. On their last night, they sat on their balcony, watching the moonlight shimmer on the water, reflecting on their years at sea. It had been an adventure of freedom and tranquility, but now it was time to return to the real world. The morning of their disembarkation was quiet and somber. As the ship docked, they packed for the last time, walking hand in hand down the gangway. The solid ground beneath their feet felt unfamiliar after a decade at sea. Without a clear plan for what lay ahead, They knew only that a new chapter awaited them. Returning to land was overwhelming. The bustling pace of life, the noise, and the absence of the ship's familiar rhythm made them feel out of place. They had sold their home long ago, assuming their travels would be brief. Now, finding a place to settle seemed daunting. Every place felt too still, missing the limitless freedom of the open sea. The world had transformed during their time away. Technology had progressed, leaving them struggling to keep up. They attended workshops to learn about smartphones and apps, but the digital world felt foreign. Reconnecting with old friends was bittersweet. Many had moved on, and some were gone. Though they tried to rebuild relationships, their decade-long absence had created a distance that couldn't be easily bridged. Despite their efforts to adjust, the ocean's call remained strong. They often visited marinas, watching cruise ships depart, longing for the life they had left behind. A year later, they booked a short cruise to revisit the Sea Voyager. Walking its decks felt like greeting an old friend. Although the crew had changed, the ship still felt familiar, bringing back memories of their secret life aboard. Their passion for cruising remained as strong as ever. With a renewed sense of adventure, George and Evelyn set out on new journeys, traveling to different corners of the world and once again embracing the freedom of the sea. Fellow travelers, fascinated by their story, often joked about trying the same. George and Evelyn laughed, knowing the secrecy and planning it had required. As they grew older, they reflected on their unusual adventure, wondering if anyone else would attempt what they had done. The world had become more connected, making such a feat unlikely. Still, they took pride in their daring past, knowing they had lived a life few could imagine, a life filled with adventure, freedom, and stories they would carry forever. During one of their return voyages, George and Evelyn received a surprise visit from the ship's captain. Their decade-long stay had become legend, and the captain was eager to meet them. Over drinks in his quarters, they reminisced about their time aboard, the close calls and the quiet adventure they had lived. As they continued to cruise, they became well known among travelers. Passengers sought their advice on long-term travel, and though they shared tips, they kept the full story of their hidden life aboard to themselves. However, time was beginning to take its toll. Lengthy journeys became increasingly tiring, leading them to choose shorter trips. Still, they were determined to keep traveling for as long as they could. After years of smaller cruises, they decided on one final grand voyage. A world cruise spanning all 7 continents. Every stop felt like a celebration of their adventurous life. As the journey ended, they stood on the deck, watching the horizon one last time. The sea had been their home, their escape. Now, with peace in their hearts, they knew it was time to slow down. They settled in a quiet coastal town, finding comfort in a small cottage by the water. It wasn't the same as the Sea Voyager, but the ocean breeze and distant waves kept them connected to the life they had loved. Their story turned into a legend among cruise enthusiasts, growing richer with each retelling. Former crew members would sometimes visit, reminiscing and laughing over shared memories. George and Evelyn cherished these visits, knowing they had left a lasting mark on those who had shared their secret. Over time, they embraced the simple joys of daily life, walks along the shore, morning coffee, and the peaceful rhythm of a life well lived. George. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn turned to George with a gentle smile. "We did it," she whispered. George squeezed her hand, understanding her words without the need for explanation. Their journey had been one of adventure, love, and freedom, a life shaped entirely by their own choices. Did you enjoy this story? What are your thoughts on the behavior of the main characters? If you were in their shoes, would you have acted the same way? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Sometimes true freedom isn't about where we are, but about having the courage to live life on our own terms. Thank you so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a fantastic day.